Hello and welcome to the NASGP podcast, The Art of GP Locuming. And today I am joined by Dr. Sarah Jacques, a GP in the southeast of England. And Sarah has worked extensively with the Doctors Association, but has also worked very hard in all sorts of other fields and general practice. So, Sarah, today it's really lovely to meet you, and would like to find out a lot about you. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me on and considering me interesting enough to speak to the rest of our colleagues. Yes, so I'm a GP of nearly 20 years, and I have worked as a locum, as a salary GP, but mostly I've worked as a GP partner, and I'm currently working back as a part-time salary GP. So yeah, most of my time, as I said, was a GP partner working full 8 clinical sessions, which, as we know, probably for the most of the 15 years that I worked, I was working 50 to 60 hours a week.
Good
I
grief.
did manage to pop out a couple of kids during that time. and But then that it did all come to a crashing halt about 3 years ago, where obviously working as the intensity that I was and with the pressures that we're all facing in general practice, it did take its toll, having 3,000 GPs register you, working 60 hours a week, being a lead for COVID, human resources, safeguarding and clinical governance, and dealing with everything that was going on in the pandemic. Things came to a head and I became significantly burnt out in August 2022, and actually sort of walked out of my on-call session and drove to the seafront and considered that my time was up. Obviously, I'm still here, but that time, obviously, it was quite devastating. But at the same time, I did take a step back from medicine, and I sort of considered what my options were. I reinvented myself. I reevaluated. And all of that time, I considered how important medicine was to me. Was it still important to me? It was something that I'd wanted to be since I was 8 years old, which I'm sure many of our colleagues can attest to. It's something that's sort of very much inside of us.
So
Because,
that's
yeah.
thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing that with us. That must be very difficult to talk about. Um, I'd be starting from then when you that feeling of 8 and being that lovely idea of wanting to be a GP. Can you take us a bit more through that journey, maybe through the sort of medical school training type thing, that kind of, and if during that time of your doctor training, hospital training, GP training, you started to hindsight is 2020 vision, but looking back, can you sort of start to see where what kind of led to that day of you driving to the beach at that August?
Um, so at the age of 8, it was a very unconventional reason as to why I decided to become a doctor. I actually decided I wanted to be a forensic pathologist and I wanted to solve murders. My
At age
hero was
8?
at 8, yes. Um, that was because I got bored practicing my piano and started looking at the medical textbooks that were above on my shelf and found a forensic medical textbook, as you do at the age of 8.
As you do.
And so, yeah, Professor Keith Simpson became my hero. And that was sort of, I learned that I had to become a doctor to become a forensic pathologist. And then my goals were set. So, yeah, going through medical school, there's the fun side of medical school. There's the hard work and the dedication and the stress of it all. But you do get instilled in you that resilience. I think that my what we call resident doctor years in hospital, I loved very much. There was, especially the firm, being a part of a firm, was very sort of, I loved being a part of something, having a team, and that fun that you used to have on the wards that got you through those really hard times, which is a very different lifestyle to when you go into general practice. You do end up being very much on your own in general practice,
That's really
despite sometimes
interesting.
you're in a building full of people because of the intensity at which we work. The door is shut, isn't it? And we just get on, and we might pass our colleagues in the corridor.
You have that as in hospital, you do have that collegiate sort of peer
Yeah.
support network just hard baked into kind of everything you do, and that's a really important point about general practice. When you're practicing, the door is closed and it's just you and the patient.
Yeah. And then I think the door remains closed whilst you're piling through all of that admin. But at the same time, there's still that team effort going on in general
Mm.
practice. You're still, figuring out all those glitches, what's working, what's not, how to make the pennies up. So you're still sat around the table as a team. But I think with the demands as they grew through the years, you spend more and more time still in front of um, your desktop and just plowing through the results and the documents and things, and it does get quite isolating, but the demands are still there. And I think sometimes, um, because you probably those relationships, I mean, we say when you become a partner, it is like getting married, isn't it? And there's a probably spend more time in our workplace than we do at home, and that probably does take its toll. But I think that because of that sometimes, and those stresses, it's easy for us to become silos within those buildings, and the communication breaks down, and the stresses. But you constantly, through, because you're told all the way through your training and everything, you've got to be more resilient. You got to do better. This still has to get done. Your patients come first, and all of these things are going round, and you're thinking, it's okay if we just make that one tweak, or I just work that little bit harder, it'll all work. It will all come better, and I'll feel like I'm doing a good job at some point. And, my patients will be happy at some point. They'll be fixed at some point. And it's always that constant, it will happen, it will happen. But I think it came to a point where I went, it's not happening. It's just, I'm just going round in circles, and the day is just constantly the same, and nothing gets better. And I think, and then because your relationships with your colleagues are all becoming strained because we're all so tired and we're all so stressed, um, it's hard sometimes for you to come together. You come further apart, just in the same way sometimes a stress in your relationships you're outside of work become. And I finally just sort of snapped and went, I don't know why I'm doing this. And it had been triggered by an accident had happened, that my family had been involved. There'd been a near miss whilst they were on holiday without me. So again, I'm like, I'm not with my family. I'm not achieving anything with my patients. And it just all came together and just went, oh, this isn't working. I can't do this anymore. But I think a lot of us are like, we're quite stubborn. We keep going, and we don't listen to those signs that were probably there in hindsight, that we need to step back. And I had to hit the wall to stop, really.
So as a resident doctor working in these clinical firms, you had that support mechanism. As a GP, you would still had that shared responsibility, but more isolated, not necessarily with the support. So perhaps you were leaning more, I'm guessing, on your family, and that's what obviously families can be for. But when that support was temporarily threatened, then it just seems that maybe that your foundations just started. Is that possibly kind of what
I
was
think
going on here?
it's more about the fact that I think a personality trait for doctors is that we try and do it all on our own, and that we mustn't be dependent on others. And I think that was my failing, in that I didn't share that I was struggling quite so much with either my family or my colleagues, because it's kind of like, you're not we can't afford for you to be not doing your job, Sarah. You provide too many clinical sessions. It's like, you're not allowed to be unwell, you're not allowed to be stressed, you're not allowed to be not quite hitting the mark. And I think that we put that pressure on ourselves, probably a bit too much, but the system also puts that pressure on us. And it's almost like, we're held hostage by our own, the system and who we are designed to be to get through the kind of job that we have to do. And I think that, you know, for whether you're a partner GP or a salary GP or a locum GP, that there is a common thread through all of those feelings. As a GP partner, though, you have that business responsibility. The buck really very much does stop with you. You don't have a supervisor, but the same isolation can occur for a locum and for a salary GP. We're all at risk from the same failings of the system.
It's like a professional personality trait almost, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Because I mean, I've come across so many people who we work in the same way, and think the same way and have the same concerns about how we're delivering our job. We want to do better. We want to do so much better for our patients, and remembering that we are all two patients, and our families are patients, and our friends are patients. So we sort of bear this huge responsibility, and perhaps we take it a bit too personally, compared to how other people who can just shut the door on their day job. I think it is more difficult for us to do that. And to a certain extent, I think what makes us who we are, we don't want, if we did shut that door, we wouldn't be who we were. So it's very, tightrope to walk to get that balance for us all.
And to get that balance, it does require personal effort though, doesn't it? If you're working 50, 60 hours and you've got all those stresses, to actually have that time out to sit back and reflect and do that proactively is quite tough.
Yeah, it is. Because we don't put ourselves first. I think we're pretty poor at that. We're typical doctors. We're terrible patients. We give all that advice to our patients. We say all the things that how they should be looking after themselves, how they should be putting themselves first, how they should take time out. And then you realize that you don't do any of that yourself.
Because we're tough and we've been trained this way and all. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So now you're back in clinical practice. How are you doing things differently? What is it that you've put into practice to look after yourself, do you think?
Well, on the face of it, it looks like I've made quite a lot of changes. In reality, so I suppose now I've gone down as far as clinical work goes in medicine. I just do one session a week, and I'm salaried. So I've taken a step back from the systemic workings, and I spend proper time with my patients. And I'm not rushing through because I know I haven't got lots of admin. I've got some supportive colleagues who created a role for me who cover a lot more of the admin for me and things. So I use that time wisely to make sure that I'm spending it with my patients, that I'm not causing that stress in the patients where you're rushing. Like I know I've got to can't give them quite as much time as they want, maybe being a bit too strict now to talk. I try and cover as much as I can with them. I run late, but I know that I'm just spending that one morning with them. It's still quite exhausting and it's still quite stressful because, obviously our patients are coming to us with so much complexity and need now that it's still quite a drain. But I keep that compartmentalized to that one morning a week. And then I sort of use what I've learned from my experience over the years and everything to be more proactive at different levels in different ways, still within medicine, still trying to fix the system. But I think my life is I still seem to have no time to myself to sit down, but my life is completely varied now. I was able to reevaluate, reinvent myself, take a step back, realize that my skills could be used in other ways. So my day is totally I now do not know what I'm happening from one day to the next. I properly have to rely on a diary because I cannot remember what I'm doing because it's so different. And every day, every week, I'm in different places, I'm different experiences, I'm on the train, I'm not just looking in one clinical room, looking at one screen out on that view of the car park that I only ever had for 15 years. Um, so it keeps it's still tiring, it's still demanding, but it still keeps me fresh, and it gives me a little bit more hope that I'm doing something a little bit more constructive with my time that benefits my colleagues and my patients and my family.
So you've kind of naturally changed what you do, how you do it, and that's given you, I guess, a different. It's allowed you to be more balanced, I guess. So tell us a bit more about what those other roles that you're doing and that you've just been talking about.
So, with regards to still quite medically based, during my time out where I stepped out from medicine, people around me had heard me moaning, whining, whichever term they wanted to call it, about the state of general practice. And no one was really listening because they were going, well, you're still going into the job at 9 o'clock in the morning. It can't be that bad. And so, but when they saw that I had actually properly stepped out of it and the situation that had arisen, I found that people were listening to what I had to say about the state of the system. And I found I had this voice, and I thought, what can I do with this? And that's when I joined Doctors Association UK. So this is a national lobbying organisation for frontline doctors. So we represent all doctors, medical students, SAS doctors, residents, consultants, GPs, locums, um, all sorts. And we speak up about the issues that are out there. And we speak to the media, we speak to the politicians, we make sure that we're talking to our colleagues at the top and thinking about policy. And it's been a really interesting journey, and to be able to speak up and be heard, to get into the room, to speak about what is happening at grassroots level. I know that sometimes we can feel that our colleagues that are in those positions at top speaking to us may be losing touch a little bit with what is properly happening on the ground. Um, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why I kind of felt the need to step back into clinical medicine, because I wanted to remain authentic. Um, so after a 2-year break, I did step back in, and so that I could properly still understand and feel what it was that I was speaking for. Um, so that's been a very interesting journey now. And now I'm co-GP lead of the GP committee on Doctor Association UK. And, we put out press releases, we put forward ideas. At the moment, obviously, we're all aware that Wes, bless him, has decided that GPs shouldn't be involved in discussing our own contract. And so we've put forward the idea of a new GP contract, and we've been pushing it out there with the GP leaders, and we're getting traction and, trying to put a positive spin on the negativity that's happening out there. So that's just sort of, one of the many things that we do at Doctors Association UK. One of the other roles that I took on was becoming a co-campaign lead for Medical Women's Federation, which is one of the oldest organisations that represents female doctors in our profession. And what we've done just recently as joining forces with Doctors Association UK. We just released a campaign about raising the awareness of domestic abuse in our healthcare professionals, because it turns out that our female healthcare professionals are at a much higher risk than the general population of suffering from domestic abuse. And we've created the first NHS Awareness Day for Domestic Abuse, which is happening tomorrow. And that's been officially recognised. And we've been doing our 16 days of activism the last couple of weeks, where we've been putting out the stats, the survivors' stories, speaking up about it. And again, as Doctors Association UK and Medical Women's Federation, we are now in the room talking to NHS England, GMC, BMA, all of our leaders, Women's Aid, looking at how we can change policy within our trusts, within our organisations, on how we support our colleagues that are suffering from domestic abuse because of the extra issues and barriers that they face. So that's been quite hard. There's been some really hard-hitting stories I've had to learn about, that my colleagues have been through, and but it's great to know that I'm in a position where I could be affecting change. So there's a different type of reward. There's there's kind of like that warm, fluffy feeling that we kind of look for
Yeah.
sometimes from our patients. I feel a little bit closer to that by some of these roles that I do. So they're the non-clinical medical roles that I
And
have.
that's taking on a lot of responsibility, isn't it? Because these are big topics, these are big themes. They're really important. It's on obviously clearly as DAUK and the Medical Women's Federation. These are things that are obviously not being taken up by other medical organisations and other bodies, which I guess is why you've stepped into this vacuum.
I think some of some of the bodies are trying to do it. I think sometimes we end up being a sort of a klaxon and and maybe a bit of glue, bringing organisations together, perhaps that are trying to do this, and then we find a way of all being in the room together and making sure that we're singing from the same hymn sheet. I I wouldn't want to say that we have too much power in the room. I mean, we're all volunteers at DAUK and Medical Women's Federation, but it's quite um, interesting to see how much sort of being on sort of outside of the room actually gives you a little bit more power actually to sort of influence behind the scenes, as it were. But yeah, I think it's definitely um, a role that needs to be there. We really do try to stay true to the grassroots elements of both organisations and speaking truth to power,
Well,
really.
I think it's staying true. And the word you used earlier about still doing general practice, getting back into general practice, is authenticity. And I think what's so wonderful to see with all your incredible campaigning work, and when we see you on TV a lot and in the papers, you come across as so authentic, and there's something I think really invigorating and genuine about being grassroots GPs. It's something that those more well established organisations, I think that's for them, that's a weakness, is because they are so well established. They've got such bureaucracy is the wrong word, but there are so many layers to them. It's hard
There's a bit
to
more
see.
diplomacy that they have to do. There's a bit
Yeah.
more bureaucracy. I think that, I mean, the BMA like working with us because they say you can say what we can't say. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
we sort of we don't beat around the bush. We kind of want to say it how it is, and feel that we're certainly at a point now where we have to say it how it is. We can't tiptoe around the issues anymore.
Yeah, and that's great. And of course, governance absolutely it absolutely does have its place, and we need that in organisations like the BMA and the LCGP, and they need that for, to do the negotiating on our behalf, to have those sorts of very high level things. It's absolutely vital. So to have this balance of you guys as the AUK with the BMA, it's a really lovely kind of team effort, isn't it? And you're a two-pronged way of doing things. So where it's 2025. It's the 9th of December. You've got the Domestic Abuse Awareness Day tomorrow, and you've been running a fantastic campaign in social media with that, and I think that's going to be really big and powerful. Lord knows what you're going to be up to tomorrow, I think, in the press, but good luck with all of that. But going forward, with everything that's going on in the NHS, with the economy, with instability across Europe and the rest of the world, and back home at general practice and NHS, where are we going, do you think? What do we need over once we finished our Christmas pudding, sitting back, relaxing, trying to not to think of work? But if we are thinking about the new year, what as GPs should we be concerned about? What does DAUK have anything in its sights that we should be thinking about?
Well, I think I've just touched on that really. I think it's the negotiation of our new contract. It's what neighborhoods look like, what that actually means for general
No
practice.
one knows. No one
No
knows.
one really knows. As usual, there's no detail. I think, there's the partnership model is under threat. General practice is under threat. Um, it's very difficult to put a positive spin on anything that appears to be coming
Mm.
out of government coming our way. And the as the downside of general practice is that we're not all agreed on how we tackle these issues. And the independent contractor status does make it difficult for us to come together as one and stand up in a way that's going to be heard. I think we've all tried, the collective action. It worked to a level, but I don't think it really that's a very difficult concept for the general public to grasp. I'm not really sure that even the trust grasped it or the politicians grasped it, because I don't think people truly understand our contract and our responsibilities and how general practice works. I think our downfall is that we make it look a little bit too easy, and
Yeah.
and people don't realize the intricacies of what goes on behind the scenes, and even just in a 10-minute consultation, aside from the administrative side of things. So I think that the way forward for general practice, I think with where we're at now, with the very huge negativity that's been going out on the media and from Mr. Streeting, we need, I think our way forward is really getting the patients, the public on side, really getting them behind us. And I think working really closely with our PPGs, our patient participation groups, and educating them and befriending them, not letting them use it as their complaints platform, making sure that, and there are some really proactive PPGs out
Mm.
there, and there are some really informed general public who do understand general practice, who really want to save general practice, save the NHS from the threat of privatisation. And I think that we need to find that headspace to work with our patients, to get them to be a voice for us as well, to speak up, as to make them realise I think we've got a problem with our 20-somethings and our 30-somethings. They don't really understand general practice in the way it used to be. And they're probably not quite sure as to what they will lose if we weren't to be there as an offering. But if we can get all of our patients to understand what general practice could look like if it was funded a little bit more and we were given back our autonomy, what kind of service we could produce for them, and then people would start to get it and they'd get behind it and they'd speak up and start saying no to what's this awful NHS 10-year plan. And I think we've already seen that the government that we have at the moment is quite subject to peer pressure, and they do their U-turn. So I think that, and clearly it would appear that the asking everyone else into the room to negotiate the GP contract rather than the BMA was a very much off the hoof decision. Wasn't proper thought out policy. So we could say we've got them on the back foot and we could take advantage of that. And, and we need more peer pressure
So
from the public. And
that's
I would say that's what we need to do.
that's a strong position to be in. So for GP locums listening to this, then many of us will be working in a few practices that we might know really well. We might have a really good, strong relationship with the partners and salary GPs there, and the practice stuff. And even the patients, what can we do as GP locums to sometimes something like the GP contract sounds very grown up and nothing to do with us, but it really is something to do with this. What can we do when we're working from practice to support this?
Um, I think it's it's really difficult, isn't it? Because interestingly, quite a lot of the DAUK GP committee are out of work because of the situation we have with um, the R's scheme, the additional reimbursement scheme. And I think that partners perhaps need to, I think there's a responsibility of the partners to maintain and recognize the importance of having a GP workforce of different colours, of having our locums, of our salary GPs as well as our partners. Um, remembering that the partners are walking such a tightrope at the moment, balancing the books and being forced into a situation of taking on different roles and then forgetting about their colleagues that now are unemployed or underutilized. And I think that we've got to, there is still much, I think it's difficult because there is still a bit of a them and us going on. I think sometimes we're forgetting as partners what locums might be doing, all the other different roles that they might be
Mm.
having, and we mustn't think of them as less committed to their roles, and that they still have to put food on their table as well. And I think that perhaps locums need to understand a little bit more of the pressures that the partners are under, and why they're being forced to make these decisions. And I think there needs to be more conversations, properly sitting down and understanding each other's roles and needs, and to come together so that we do become a team again, so that the government can't take advantage of divide and rule, and that we all try and strike a balance. It's a really difficult position for everyone to be in. And very much the AUK very much been speaking up about the underemployment of the GPs. We've spoken up about the fact that even though Wes made initially that adjustment to the reimbursement scheme, that we could only employ newly qualified GPs across PCNs, we said that is really not an appropriate way to support our newly qualified GPs or employ them, and we should be valued more than that. We've spoken very loudly about that, and I think we do have a cohort of partners that take advantage of these, and that they are the minority, and the majority are really trying to
Yes.
look after the whole workforce. But I think we need to, I think sometimes you read on the forums, there's still salaried and locums speaking against partners, and partners are going, oh, the salaried and locums are making these demands. We need to stop that and recognize that it's difficult for all. We have all slightly difficult issues to face, but we need to come together, because we're in quite a significant risk of not existing as general practice as it knows. And I think that's a really horrible, negative, apocalyptic type view, but I kind of fear that is where we're at. But if we don't all stick together, it's going to make it much easier for that to happen.
As you're saying this, in my what I'm seeing in my mind is what I found so useful over my career is, and I don't in any way wish to trivialize this, but having a coffee break with the partners in a practice. I've just learnt so much more than I could anywhere else by practices that still have got the time to have a coffee break, and they are, in my mind, in my experience, practices that stop and have a coffee break just function just so much more smoothly. But joining those and having those conversations and asking the partners direct questions and the practice managers about direct questions about the contract balance is a great way to learn from their experience, which as a GP locum is just sometimes so hard to otherwise know about. So yeah, like you say, those sorts of conversations over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee can be so powerful, and is might be some of that glue, though, the fitting in between the gaps that you were talking about earlier, that we all might need to be doing. So, Sarah, so finishing off now, you've I feel exhausted talking to you in a very, in a lovely way. You do so much, and you have so,
Yeah, I haven't told
and
you about the other
you
half.
you haven't told us about the other. Maybe that's another episode, but you do so much, and so how do you then relax? How do you unwind? How do you make sure that you can wake up fresh on a Monday morning to you've talked about your piano playing. You've got a couple of kids. Although I'm sure they're not kids anymore. But what do you do to unwind, recharge?
Um, it is sort of yeah, it's family time. My kids they're 13 and 15 going on 25.
Yeah.
So they're um they're good fun to be around. You can have I can have a really good laugh. My
Oh,
daughters have both inherited my sarcastic streak. And so there is quite a lot of banter in the house, and so there's quite a lot of laughter. Um, we all play musical instruments. So we're all guitar players, piano players. And for Christmas, it's going to be a very interesting Christmas. We bought family presents for us all, a drum kit and a bass guitar. So we can't play the drums. None of us can play the drums.
no one can.
But
You don't need to, do you?
um, so we'll be doing that. So making a lot of noise. Our neighbours will hate us. Um, But so yeah, and also we all like our sports. Everyone's hockey players in the house. So we that's not the most relaxing, hockey playing in the wet and the rain and traveling around picking on my kids up all the time. But
Helps
you
you
know,
unwind.
that's
The playing it helps you unwind, though, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. The ball is Buzz Streeting's head. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry.
I didn't hear anything.
And yeah, I try and do Pilates. I'm a woman of a certain age, so I've had to change the type of exercise I have to do. Pilates really, I sell that to all my patients now.
Wow.
I really
Okay.
enjoy Pilates. It really does make the body feel a lot better. Um, and yeah, I do a bit of baking. And we do sit down and watch quite a lot of TV. We're watching Bake Off series back from 2017 and working our way through. We do crazy things like that and just sit there and it becomes this major critique. Yeah, my kids are very, very critical. Um,
That's it.
so yeah,
That's great. That you've raised them well.
yeah. And I do have two crazy cocker spaniels um, who are intent on injuring themselves. So I actually called my new puppy Wes. So he is actually called Wesley. Um,
Was that
also,
by design or by accident? How did that?
um, well, because my puppy has been renamed, am I allowed to swear? You little shit. Um, and I found myself calling Mr. Streeting that on occasion. So there is a bit of a likeness. But my puppy Wes does like eating things that he shouldn't, that aren't going to pass. So we have had to take him to the vet several times to induce vomiting. And the vets are just constantly covered in, especially the slug pellets he ate the other day. The vet's clinic room was blue. And in the process, my older dog did break his leg. That was £7,000 worth of surgery.
Oh,
So yeah, I've got my work cut out with my spaniels, which we have a lot of fun with. They create a lot of amusement in the house as well. So yeah, generally my house is just chaos. It's just a constant flow of chaos. There's usually more kids in the house than I actually think I have. I can't keep count, but yeah, that's fine. It's just you know, keeps it exciting, keeps it fresh.
it sounds very happy, very loving, very noisy.
Yes.
But it sounds great. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation on the NESGP podcast. And really good luck with the campaign launch tomorrow, or the campaign, the actual day itself on domestic abuse with NHS staff. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you for having me.